Dr. Bryson here with another video for the criminology class. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about differential association theory. So I'm going to actually stop the screen share for a minute and show you my Bozo doll. See Bozo? If you can read it because of the light on it, but this is my Bozo. Now this is a squishy toy. So, it's the kind you can use for stress, right? But we're going to be talking about this a little bit here in just a minute. So let's go back to the screen share. All right, differential association. Very important to understand that the basic concept of differential association is the differentials in time that we spend with particular individuals relate to whether we will have criminal attitudes or not. So this particular unit, we're focusing on criminal thinking and the theories that relate to criminal thinking. Now, differential association theory and neutralization theory, which is going to be a different video, might not seem like they relate a whole lot, but they do. Differential association tells us how we develop the way that we think. Our differentials in time, in the way we hang out with people, makes a difference. The heart of differential association theory says, if I'm hanging out with people who hold to criminal attitudes, criminal beliefs, I'm going to end up committing crime. I'm going to adopt their belief system, and I'm going to do what they do. If, on the other hand, I'm hanging out with a whole bunch of people instead that have beliefs against criminal behavior, they do not have criminal attitudes, then I'm going to end up believing, thinking, and acting more like them. Now, that's the heart of differential association theory, the differential in time that I spend. So I might spend a little bit of time with folks with criminal attitudes, but a whole lot of time with a whole lot more people that have anti-criminal beliefs and attitudes. Then I'm going to be more likely to be anti-criminal in my beliefs and attitudes. All right, so let's hop to it. So differential association theory is predominantly a post-World War II theory. It's probably important to understand that Edwin Sutherland was influenced by what he saw with the Nazis and how the Nazis were able to overtake the entire culture of Germany, it seemed like, at the time. Though, please understand, there were those Germans who were against the Nazis, Dietrich Bonhoeffer in particular, who died fighting the Nazis, not in battle, but in other ways. But anyway, so it's important to understand this is predominantly a post-World War II theory. There are a lot of folks that have claimed that from roughly 1946 to about 1958, 59, and 60 were the time when adolescence as a stage of life truly became its own separate stage. In other words, prior to that, at around 13, 14, individuals became adults. They would marry, they would get jobs, but by the post-war era, in that roughly 15-year period, adolescence as a stage of life can be seen as really developing. Erik Erikson is doing his work at this time. So in the 1950s, it's important to understand also that it was not the golden age that most people like to think that it was. Charles Starkweather and Caroline Fugate, they murdered 11 people in Nebraska and Wyoming in 1958 in a crime spree. The Cold War was going on. Okay, adolescence is a new stage of life based on the Industrial Revolution. So one of the theories is that adolescence developed because the Industrial Revolution, with individuals going to work in factories rather than on farms, that this kind of delayed their becoming an adult to have to go get a job. But juvenile delinquency was becoming really significant in the 1950s. A very strong focus on it. Rebel Without a Cause, Splendor in the Grass, A Summer Place. All of those movies were here in the U.S., produced here in the U.S., and they dealt with teen angst and rebellion. In France, a film called The 400 Blows. In England, a film called If, and another film called A Clockwork Orange that was later to be released in the late 1960s. If was in the early 1960s, but during this time of the heyday of differential association theory. Rebel Without a Cause is a great film. Yes, I get that today we look back on it and we think, oh, that was a cheesy film. But if we realize that it mirrored the beliefs of the day, then it makes more sense, at least academically. All right, so learning theories, and this is the thing, because remember my Bobo doll or Bozo doll that I showed you? Now, Bandura called it the Bobo doll, but Bandura hypothesized the psychological theory of social learning. And it assumes that our attitudes and behavioral decisions are acquired via communication after we are born. In other words, we are born as a tabula rasa. That means a completely blank slate. So criminal and non-criminal behavior both are learned through cultural values that we internalize. So we individually have to internalize them, and there are a lot of different reasons why we might do that. But the influence of peers and significant others on an individual's behavior cannot be overstated in this theory. So family is the primary influence in childhood, but once a child starts school, especially as they're getting closer to middle school and in middle school and then high school, their peers become their most significant influence. And it might even be peers they've never met. Peers in the pop culture, on television. Okay, so classical conditioning. It's important to understand this as well with Pavlov. Classical conditioning is where animals learn through associations between stimuli and responses. Okay, so relational frames are stimuli and involuntary responses that are framed together. Two stimuli are repeatedly paired. So Pavlov's dogs is an example. We're pairing the bell with the presentation of food. Those are the two stimuli, and the response is the salivation. Operant conditioning is pairing a voluntary behavior with a consequence. So training a dog to sit by having them sit and then giving them a treat, that's operant conditioning. Ringing the bell and feeding them so that they begin to put the ringing of the bell and the food in the same frame together, that's classical conditioning. All right, so Edwin Sutherland, in his Principles of Criminology, he used classical conditioning to explain criminal behavior. In other words, the praise and the stimuli of acceptance and all of these things are taken together. So when I am hanging out with non-criminal thinking peers, and they have non-criminal attitudes at the same time they're accepting me, I have those two things in a relational frame. I believe I'm going to be accepted by being non-criminal. The same works for the criminal thinking peers with their attitudes. He was interested in how criminal values and attitudes could be culturally transmitted from one generation to the next as well. And so he had 9 elements of differential association. And in fact, the 3 pages you had to read in the textbook are from that. Okay? So, criminal behavior is learned. It's learned in interaction with others. The principal part of learning of criminal behavior occurs within intimate personal groups. When criminal behavior is learned, the learning includes techniques of committing the crime, specified direction of motives, drives. Okay, you can read all 9 of in the textbook, but very important to understand. So Sutherland theorized that crime occurs when associations favorable to violation of the law outweigh associations favorable to conforming to the law. Okay, it's very important to understand. So, criticisms of differential association theory. It is impossible to operationalize the associations favorable and unfavorable to committing crime. It's next to impossible to do. It seems to be valid for white collar crime in a study with business students. But the thing is, we tend not to look at white collar crime when we're doing studies. All right. Sutherland admitted that the process may be that individuals may commit crime that they have seen others commit. Boy, there's a typo there. Okay. So he admitted that the process may be the bozo doll. See, this is Albert Bandura. We ape what we see, meaning we mimic what we see. So Bandura did this famous experiment where he had children watch people playing with the bozo doll, the big one, the blow-up doll, that has the weight in the bottom, and you can punch it and it falls over, and when you punch it, but it pops right back up because of the way it's weighted at the bottom. So Bandura did these experiments, and when children saw adults hitting and being aggressive with the doll, and then they were placed in a room to play with the doll, they would do the exact same thing. When children when a different set of children were able to observe adults being gentle and being kind and playing in a non-aggressive way with the Bobo doll, those children did the exact same thing. In other words, they mimicked the behavior that they saw, simply mimicked what they saw. So one of the criticisms of differential association theory, and that Sutherland actually admitted might be what's really going on, is that they're simply mimicking what they see. All right, so that is the end of the differential association video, and I'm going to stop the recording, and we'll see you next video.